Joining me now is McKay Coppin, staff writer for The Atlantic. So he's made a transformation. He's seen the light, as Republicans like to say, about Donald Trump. And he's really leaning in hard to this idea that he's a working class guy who struggled in a community and understands that community and can help translate Donald Trump to those people.
Right. And, in some ways, it seems like a really conventional pick. He has an inspiring, personal story. Obviously, he knows how to tell it. He wrote a best-selling memoir that sold millions of copies. What I find interesting, though, is how his views of that community he comes from have actually changed. I think a lot of people know that he wrote Hillbilly Elegy, that made him famous. I think a lot of people have not read Hillbilly Elegy, and if you have, you see that it's actually a pretty complicated and nuanced treatment of the white working class. He actually, in that book, writes that he believes the culture he was raised in had a lot of problems, that the community he comes from deserves blame for a lot of the problems that it suffers from. That is not what you're hearing from him now. In his convention speech last night, he was talking about his community as victims of the ruling class. And so that kind of transformation is an important trick that he's pulled off.
Well, let's read a little bit of what he wrote in The Atlantic around that time that Hillbilly Elegy came out. He said, "Yet so long as people rely on that quick high, so long as wolves point their fingers at everyone but themselves, the nation delays a necessary reckoning. There is no self-reflection in the midst of false euphoria. Trump is cultural heroin. He makes some feel better for a bit, but he cannot fix what ails them. And one day they'll realize it."
Mm-hmm.
One day, maybe a little bit farther ahead of us than J.D. Vance was hoping for initially 8 years ago when he was writing about Donald Trump and why he thought he was bad for the country.
Now, the story he tells is that he's a convert, that he had been taken in by the media's propaganda about Trump, and that once he actually did his own research and started to listen to him, he realized that he had been wrong about him. Fine, that's the story that a lot of Republicans have told over the years. But I do think that what you just read is emblematic of this kind of broader transition he's made, which is that in no longer critiquing the kind of cultural milieu that he came up in, and instead casting these white working class communities purely as victims, he is aligning himself with Trump in feeding grievance to those communities, right? He understands, and look, I get it. The stories you tell as a memoirist are different than the ones you tell as an ambitious politician. He realizes white working class voters do not want to hear him lecture them about, welfare queens or whatever he wrote about in his book. He wants them to hear that they're going to save them.
Well, I mean, he's talking about in this article not pointing the finger at everybody else, having some introspection and understanding what you do to create the problem that you live within.
Personal responsibility, which used to be a Republican talking point.
Republican, and he kind of argues that by picking himself up by his bootstraps. But the argument for him then, and I think the argument that people still make about Donald Trump pretty credibly, is that you can't just point your finger everywhere else.
Right.
Because these problems are not so easy to solve. And what Donald Trump has been doing successfully politically is saying, no, the problems are actually pretty easy. These complicated issues that Democrats talk about, these complicated situations around the world, the war in Ukraine, what's happening in Israel, that's not a big deal. I can fix it because I understand that, I'm the best negotiator there is out there.
That is the trick that he's pulled off. And you remember in the 2016 convention, his famous line from that speech was, "I alone can fix it," right? He has boiled down every problem that his base encounters in their personal lives to, a very simple formula of you are victims of the ruling class. I will beat them for you. I will be your retribution.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.